What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kevin Valentin.
And I'm the other host. My name is Kyle Dabro. Kev, it's kind of crazy, bro. It's been a year, but we are back, dude. And so is
We
football.
are back. Oh, thank the Lord above that football's back. It's been too long of a hiatus. Basketball was great. The Mavs went to the finals. We obviously lost, but I was able to be there for Game 4. That was fantastic. The Yankees are doing whatever the hell they're doing, and
Up
then
and down.
obviously the Gators are the Gators are sucking. I could just have literally the
Oh,
Colts to look forward to, and
dude,
Lord knows what else.
that was a beatdown on Saturday. I watched that game.
Yeah, I was able to watch it at work. So I'm just thankful that football is back. So yes, I don't expect the Colts to go to the Super Bowl, but by all means, I will be distracted between fantasy football and just having the culture back. So I'm
I,
I'm thrilled to be back.
I will say one thing about the Gators. I understand, they got their asses whipped by the U this past weekend, but it could be worse. You could be a Florida State fan and they could be 0-2, and essentially their season is over already.
100%.
So
All those FSU fans, all that litigation with suing the college football playoff and the ACC, and for it to mean nothing, right? I
0
think it's 0-2.
0-2,
I
0-2.
think so. Yeah, I
Mm.
think both of them were unranked opponents because FSU fans love to come at Gator fans for no reason, and they love to say, "Oh, well, you guys are going to lose probably just as many games." We also have the hardest schedule in the country, and we lost to the University of Miami. You lost to Georgia Tech and Boston College.
And
So I'm
Boston
just,
College, and
I'm just gonna leave that there.
and
I'm not trying to be petty, but it
I,
is what it is.
I watched that game. Boston College ran through them the entire night.
It was horrendous.
Yeah. Hey, shout out to BC though. They showed up. They didn't
BC
care.
played good. BC did play very good, and I did enjoy a good little FSU ass whooping. But nevertheless, we're back. Today's the first episode in a long time. Kyle and I may be a little rusty, so excuse us for
Bear with us.
mishaps, some miscues, and probably a lot of mispronunciations. But we're gonna power through the episode. We really wanted to bring some content back to you guys. I wanted to take responsibility and apologize for our hiatus. I had to move. I had a couple of things going on in my personal life. I wasn't really able to be flexible. I got a second job, but we're back here. We're going to make it work. Kyle and I have already discussed the parameters around the episodes. We may not post as frequently, we may not record as frequently, but we are just so passionate about what we do. We want to make sure that we're able to give you guys the content that you enjoyed. I got a lot of messages from people once they started seeing us post shorts again. So it was encouraging to see the fan base that we did bring reach out to us and kind of tell us, they're excited for us to come back. So for those of you that stood loyal, reached out, asked questions, even some of our other podcast hosts that we had made friends with over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years, we do appreciate the support, and hopefully we can do you guys right.
Yeah, just the only thing is, coming back, it's been what, a year, and I got a baby face, and I'm not really happy about that. But I mean, outside of that, just on my end, it's good to be back. Um, Basically, just to reiterate what Kev said, it's just fun for me, and I know it's definitely fun for Kev just to discuss the sports topics that we did in the past. And I understand, like, when it comes to Kev's situation and my situation, just life happens, and I'm just glad that we were able to get back together and honestly kind of rekindle what Kevin and I had been doing long before the podcast had started. Which, if you guys had seen what we talked about when we first started the podcast, the conversations that we had about sports, that started way before there was ever a podcast. This started back in a college dorm room, back in what, like 2014,
When
in
I first
2014,
moved here.
2015. So I mean, it's just always good to be able to get back into a situation where Kevin and I can discuss sports like we used to, and the fact that football is back in full swing. Obviously, we got the Ravens and Chiefs game tonight, and I know Kev will bring up some other games that we'll go over. But like Kev said, it's great to be back, and hopefully we can do our part in making sure that we provide you guys the best content that we can. Like I said, bear with us. It's been a year since we've recorded any sort of episode, so there will be mistakes. There probably will be times where it's not as fluid as what we used to do, but hopefully we'll be able to shake off the rust sooner rather than later.
All right, we gonna make it. So I'm not too worried about it. Besides, you gotta rip the band-aid off. It is what it is. So we're gonna start off with our agenda really quick. Obviously, we are recording the day of the Chiefs and Ravens game. That is set to happen within the next hour and change. So, obviously, we are just going to give our brief predictions that are going to come out tomorrow morning, if not maybe later today. It really depends. Nevertheless, that's going to be the first game. We wanted to make sure that we discussed the first game of the NFL season. We have the defending Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs, at home against the Baltimore Ravens with the two-time reigning MVP in Lamar Jackson. A big game to discuss. A great way to kick off the season. Obviously, a repeat of last year's AFC Championship. So we are going to see, can Lamar bounce back? Can the Chiefs kind of keep and maintain this momentum to potentially three-peat? Then we are going to dive into tomorrow evening's game, which is going to be the Green Bay Packers against the Philadelphia Eagles in Brazil. A lot of controversy has been spun around this game, not necessarily for the game itself, but mainly about the security and the fear of the neighbors, or not neighbors, the surrounding cast of obviously the people of Brazil. Players on the Philadelphia side as well as the Green Bay side are concerned for safety issues. AJ Brown and Darius Slay have already stated that they will probably be staying in their rooms. They will play the game, and then everybody just wants to go home. Kyle and I are going to discuss more about, is the NFL wise for putting players in danger, putting their player safety kind of behind the profit of the NFL. So we'll discuss that. Then we will talk a little bit about Kyle's team, the New England Patriots, and their new look with Jacoby Brissett and Drake May in the wing, going up against Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Will Jamar Chase play? Will that contract negotiation that transpired over the offseason kind of carry over into the season with rust? We all know the Bengals don't necessarily start the season off over the last two to 3 years very well. They always start off very slow, but pick up later down the road. So that'll be an interesting conversation. And then we're going to slide into my team. Indianapolis gets the rematch against the Houston Texans. We are going to be home. So obviously everybody knows it was a win or get in situation for the Colts last year, and we fell short. Gardner Minshew, you can blame Goodson, the running back that dropped the pass on the fourth down play. But nevertheless, we lost. Houston moved on. Houston ended up winning a playoff game with C.J. Stroud. We're going to see if C.J. can carry that and avoid a sophomore slump. They added Stephon Diggs and a couple of other pieces. And obviously for Indianapolis, Anthony Richardson, biggest question mark. Can he stay healthy? Will he be able to lead us to some form of consistency? This will be the first time that we will have a repeated starting quarterback in week one over the last 7 to 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. And then we have not won a week one matchup in almost a decade. So a lot riding on us. We may, depending on time, bring up the Jets and 49ers game. There's a lot to unpack there as well. Obviously, everybody knows the offseason that the 49ers had between Trent Williams holding out for a while. Brandon Ayuk held out for some time. Christian McCaffrey's been hurt. Dre Greenlaw is still injured, recovering from a torn Achilles in the Super Bowl. And Ricky Pearsall, the rookie wide receiver out of Florida, just recently got shot. So there is a lot of question marks on whether or not San Francisco is going to be fully healthy and ready for this game. And then you have the Jets. That headline speaks for itself. Aaron Rodgers. At 40 years old, are you going to be able to perform? Are you going to be able to bounce back from a ruptured Achilles after only 3 plays, less than a full series against the Bills last season on Monday Night Football? So he gets a redo. He gets a full retry, and we'll see if the Jets can prevail. But hey, jam-packed agenda. Kyle, let's just dive right into it. First game of the year. Ravens, Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, 2-time Super Bowl MVP, or 3-time Super Bowl MVP, should I say. And there's a lot here to look at. Can the Chiefs start the repeat, or will the Ravens find a way to finally knock Patrick Mahomes off that high horse?
Well, I think as far as the game goes on Thursday night, I'm still going to pick the Chiefs to win over the Ravens. I do think that it's going to be a pretty compelling game nonetheless, just because, look, when you have the quarterback matchup of Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, I mean, everybody knows that it's going to be just electric, just because of what Lamar Jackson could do with his feet. Obviously, the magic that Patrick Mahomes can bring on any given play if he runs outside of the pocket and being able to find some sort of receiver or try to find Travis Kelce when he's scrambling either to his right or to his left. But, outside of that, when I look at both teams here, I'll start with the Chiefs first, just because the Chiefs, granted, they're coming off of back-to-back Super Bowl championships, and now they're potentially going for a three-peat. And one of the things that I can speak to about the Chiefs is, I can speak about this because I'm a Patriot fan, and they've kind of gone through something similar that Patriot fans experienced when Tom Brady and the Patriots won their first 3 Super Bowls in the early 2000s. After they won that third Super Bowl, there was definitely some change that happened. There was definitely some roster turnover that occurred with the Patriots. And there was a couple years where things were a little bit in flux. Granted, the Patriots were still a good team, but they weren't at the same caliber as what they were during their dynasty run in the early 2000s. And I do think when it comes to the Chiefs, that is something that they may have to contend with over the next, year or two. Do I think that there's a good chance that they could go back to the Super Bowl and win 3 Super Bowls in a row? I do think that's possible, just because if you have Patrick Mahomes back there and, barring some sort of injury where he gets hurt, God forbid he gets hurt, if they're able to keep a solid core of the receivers that they have, granted, it's not like what it used to be, when they used to have Tyreek Hill and McCall Hardman and Demarcus Robinson. But the fact that you still have Travis Kelce, you have Rashee Rice, and now you have some up and coming wide receivers. You have Xavier, what's the guy's name? Xavier Worthy. I was going to say Xavier Lee, but no, it's Xavier Worthy. It would have been interesting to see Marquise Brown out there, but unfortunately, he's not going to be playing on Thursday night, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. But despite the fact, I think the Chiefs are still going to be a pretty solid team. They have a great running back in Isaiah Pacheco who literally just runs over people for fun. He seems to take great pride in that and great joy in that. So I think this may be one of those years where, not only is Patrick going to do what he's going to do, but I definitely think that they're going to rely on their run game more than they have in years past. And I wouldn't be surprised if Isaiah Pacheco gets over 1,000 yards this year, as long as they continue to feed him the ball. When it comes to Baltimore is in a situation where, the Chiefs are above them, but the Ravens are not too far behind. And I think when it comes to the Ravens this year, I want to see whether or not that they can make that leap where they can actually not only compete with the Chiefs, but actually knock them off the throne. And the only team in the AFC recently that's been able to do that was the Bengals back in 2022. And that was the year that Joe Burrow led the Bengals to the Super Bowl, where they ended up losing to the Rams at SoFi. Outside of that, if you want to kind of like take away the 2018 Patriots when they beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, the Bengals have been the only team to really knock the Chiefs off the throne here. So when it comes to the Ravens, this may be one of those years where maybe they're looked at as the underdog. Maybe not a lot of people are giving them the respect that they deserve. And maybe they use that as fuel. Maybe they use that as bulletin board material to, not only shock the world, but potentially, knock off KC from that top AFC throne, if you want to say. But this may be the year to do it, just because KC may be in a little bit of flux when it comes to their skill players. This may be the last year that we see Travis Kelce before he retires, because as far as I see it, I think his time is limited in the NFL. But, I think this is going to be an exciting game. I still think that the Chiefs are probably going to win by a touchdown in this game. But overall, I think both of these teams are going to be in a kind of the best way that I could describe it is this is going to be a year of flux for both teams. And I think it's a little too early to tell, which team is going to be the best over the other or better than one or the other. But either way, I think it's going to be a very compelling game on Thursday night, and I look forward to it.
Sorry, still getting used to the equipment. It's been a little bit, sitting here muting myself by damn mistake. When it comes to the game, I am conflicted. I have Derrick Henry in fantasy, so obviously I just need Derrick to do what he needs to do. So I'm going to just put that out there real quick. But in reality, it always comes down to, can you beat Patrick? Point blank. I mean, Patrick comes from behind. Patrick can play with the lead. Doesn't like to turn the ball over. Obviously, Kyle already alluded to Isaiah Pacheco is an emerging back. As long as he can stay healthy and they feed him touches, he is somebody that can take the load off of his back. And realistically, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year while also leading the league in drops. That says a lot about a quarterback who had a receiving core who was inconsistent, to say the least. Yes, Travis Kelce was a staple. Yes, Rashee Rice came on late in the season and actually kind of came into his own. And he'll probably be receiver one outside of Travis. But then you go and you draft Worthy. Then you go and you bring Hollywood Brown. You brought back Juju Smith-Schuster, who helped you win a Super Bowl, albeit because of a holding call. But again, another veteran presence in this locker room. Another for sure proven wide receiver in the league. So they won last year without this talent. and they didn't really lose much outside of L'Jarius Sneed, who is now in Tennessee. When you talk about the offensive game that the Kansas City Chiefs bring to the table, as long as they have 15 on their side, it's hard to bet against them. Now, when you talk about Baltimore, they lost a couple of different pieces. I believe they lost their offensive coordinator. I believe that they lost a good portion of their defensive staff. I do believe that they lost some key pieces in the secondary that were critical, successful run and having a dominant defense. And then you go and you lose Patrick Queen. That's huge. That is absolutely a pivotal portion, the leader of a defense in that center of the field at the linebacker position. So you say the Chiefs get better, the Ravens got worse. It's really hard to pick against Patrick. So I'm going to safely say I do believe that the Kansas City Chiefs come out on top with this victory. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's going to be a blowout because we all know that last year the Chiefs lost opening day, week 1, but they did not have Chris Jones, and Travis Kelce ended up getting hurt. So not to make excuses, but it's a matter of who wants it more. It's the first game of the season. A statement's going to be made. And of course, the Kansas City Chiefs will be unveiling their next banner. So will Baltimore take that personally? Will they take that on the chin and say, we could have stopped them? Who knows? But I do believe this is going to be a great game. And in order for Baltimore to win, Lamar Jackson is going to have to play damn near flawless football and stop relying so much in that arm like they tried to force him to be. And remember, the reason he's a 2-time MVP is because he's a dual threat quarterback. Run the football, hand it over to Derrick Henry, create the play action, and feed Zay Flowers. Baltimore can beat them. It's a matter of will they.
Yeah, and like I said, I think when it comes to Baltimore, they have the pieces to be able to get it done. It's just that they have to come down. It literally just comes down to one thing and being able to execute in the moment. And up until this point, Casey has gotten the best of them. And I mean, it's not just Baltimore. I mean, Buffalo has given KC all that they can handle, yet KC still comes out on top. The only team, like I said, in recent memory that's really given KC any sort of, I guess, issue per se, is probably the Bengals. And, we don't know if they're going to be able to kind of reinstill that team that they had back in 2022, because last year for the Bengals, it was a pretty up and down year, to say the least. Obviously, Burrow was hurt, and it kind of just threw the entire season just out of whack from their perspective. But, when it comes to KC, they're the top dog right now. They've been the top dog for the last 2 years. They have a chance to make NFL history and potentially win 3 Super Bowls in a row. And, I mean, if they were able to do that, I mean, the only team that we've seen really have any sort of success like that was probably the Bills back in the 90s, where they made it to 4 Super Bowls in a row, but they lost all 4. Now, if KC were to be able to go to 3 in a row and win 3 in a row, I mean, that would be just unprecedented as far as I'm concerned. But they have Mahomes. And when it comes down to that, as long as you have him and he's healthy, you got a shot. And he's very similar to what Brady and the Patriots had after they won 3 Super Bowls in the first 4 years that he was a starter. And like I said, they may take a step back. It's just because their skill players may not be as reliable compared to what they had in years past. But like you said, if they led the league in drops last year and yet they were still able to win the Super Bowl, that says something. And, we'll see what happens. But I imagine just the environment in Kansas City at Arrowhead Stadium is going to be electric when, the players run out onto the field, they unveil the banner. It's going to be quite the scene when those two teams kick it off on Thursday night. And honestly, probably one of the best games in recent memory to kind of kick off the NFL season. It's going to be fun. But with that said, we're going to transition to our next game. And this is one of Kev's teams. It's not his favorite team, but it's probably his second favorite team. And that's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. They're going up against the Green Bay Packers. This game is not taking place in the United States. It is being taken place in Brazil. And I know Kev has already mentioned some of the issues that are surrounding that. That is something that we may dive into here in a couple minutes. So, Kev, to kick this one to you, obviously, we got the Packers and the Eagles playing in Brazil. It's going to be a big game down there. But how do you see both teams playing out, not only in Brazil, but for the season as a whole?
So, I mean, it really depends on your perspective, right? Obviously, people were concerned about Jordan Love on the Green Bay side when he came out of college behind Aaron Rodgers. Inaccuracy was an issue. Demeanor was an issue. Mentality was an issue. But again, all of that came while he was a backup to one of the greatest quarterbacks of this generation. When he was put on the spot, he struggled. And then when he had a full season under his belt, he started off slow. And then at some point towards the middle half, maybe even earlier middle half of the season, Jordan Love came on. Jordan Love ended up earning one of the highest paid contracts in NFL history for the quarterback position, upwards of $50+ million a season. So I think he turned out pretty well. And then you talk about the supporting cast out there. Unfortunately, they did let go of Aaron Jones, and A.J. Dillon did get hurt as well. So they are missing some key pieces. But when you talk about what Green Bay was able to do from a holistic standpoint last year, they did turn a lot of heads. And then you talk about Philadelphia starting off 11-1 every single game after that and falling not just short, plummeting off of the side of a cliff to lose in the wild card game when they were projected to go back to the Super Bowl. Now, how do you bounce back? You go and you get Saquon Barkley. You trade for Jahad Dotson. You go and you sign Devin White. You go and you draft 2 corners that could go and add some depth to that weakened secondary. You bring back CJ Gardner-Johnson. Yes, Jason Kelce retired. Yes, Fletcher Cox retired. But there were already holes on that roster well before they were going to leave. And they had some pretty solid replacements with Jordan Davis at the DT position, Jalen Carter at the DT position, and I'm pretty sure they just moved over one of their guards in Cam Jurgens to play the center position, which, again, if I remember correctly, Cam Jurgens was a pretty good pick coming out of college as himself. So I predict the Eagles. I was actually looking at their schedule with Isabel's dad. Again, my girlfriend's parents. All of them are from the Delaware area, which means they're all obviously Philadelphia Eagles fans. We went down the schedule. Realistically, they should win no less than 12 games this year. And that is just strictly upon roster. They're better than this team. They're better than this team. They may lose to this team. Maybe they have a rubber match, a tight game against this team. But when it comes to the end result, I don't see the Eagles losing less than 12 games this year. And if they do, it's a bigger issue than people let on. They had all the rumors with Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts not getting along last season. They had a horrible offensive and defensive coordinator system out there that have now been replaced with Vic Fangio and obviously Kellen Moore. Jalen Hurts is in year 4 or 5 of his development. A.J. Brown got an extension. Devontae Smith got an extension. This team is poised for another deep run. There is zero reason why the Philadelphia Eagles are not regarded as a top 2 team in the NFC because of this lineup, because of this coaching staff, and because of the improvements that they made because of Howie Roseman. So I predict the Eagles to come out here and fire on all cylinders. Now, Devin White did not travel to Brazil. He does have an ankle injury, so he will not be playing. But I do think that Philly will bounce back, but it will be a very close game because, as I said, Jordan Love got paid. Now it's a matter of, are you going to show your worth and repeat that success in the following season? I think he's got the confidence. I think Matt LaFleur showed when he was with Aaron Rodgers, and now with Jordan Love, it doesn't matter the quarterback that he has. They just need to tighten a little bit on defense, and I think that they can make it a competitive game. If anything, I don't see the Green Bay Packers not making the playoffs. So please let me know what you guys think. I'd love to have a debate. I'd love to have a discussion. Kyle and I are always up for, discussions in the comments, but that's going to be a really good game with 2 strong NFC opponents, and I really think Philly ends up pulling it out in Brazil.
Yeah, like when it comes to both teams, I think they're both in prime position to be NFC contenders this year. I definitely see the Eagles bouncing back after the debacle that they had at the end of the regular season last year. And Kev, like you said, that's kind of crazy. I don't know if you could see it, but whenever you sip from your thermos, there's like a little like bubble that shows up. It's like a little water bubble, and it has like a little thumbs up with it. So
Oh, that's the new Apple software thing, because I think you could do like this and that, because I'm doing it on my phone, and you could do a heart one too. It's weird. But anyway.
it might be because you were drinking water at the same time, so it probably popped up because of that. But either way, that was kind of cool. I wasn't expecting that. But to get back on topic, I definitely see both teams having a pretty successful year. Like I said, I think the Eagles are going to be able to bounce back from that nightmare situation that happened at the end of last year. And when it comes to the Packers, I think they just focus on the things that need to be done to continue the momentum that they had from last year. And, when it comes to the Packers, I'll start with them first and then I'll transition to the Eagles. When I look back at at acquiring Josh Jacobs, that may be probably one of the most unsung transactions for the Packers the entire year because, like Kev said, A.J. Dillon is out for the rest of the year. So they're going to have to really rely on him carrying the bulk work with the run game. And obviously, when it comes to Jordan Love, he has definitely progressed since coming into the NFL a couple of years ago, and he definitely deserved that contract extension, making him one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. Now it's just coming to a point where, now can he take his game and elevate it to the next step? When it comes to the Eagles, the biggest thing for me is the situation between Nick Sirianni and the rest of the team, because it is undeniable that there was legitimate tension between Nick Sirianni. There may have been some coaching staff members a part of it as well, and the rest of the team. And it just seemed like pretty much the last, I'd say, third or like 40% of the season, it was a completely different team that we saw compared to the first half of the year, or like the first 2/3 of the year. And if that were to continue, if there is any sort of tension that has lingered on into this year and it now becomes a focal component of this team, that could potentially derail this team this year. Because, like Kev said, when you look at just the names, when you look at this team on paper, this team is stacked as far as the Eagles are concerned. Like Kev said, Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, Dallas Goedert. You brought in Devin White. And, despite the fact that you lost Fletcher Cox, they were able to bring back some key pieces to essentially reinforce not just the defensive side, but the offensive side as well. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, because when you look at Philly has always been a very fast team. They've been very run heavy, and they love running the read option with Jalen Hurts. And I think that is going to be renewed, and it's going to be a little bit different with Saquon, just because Saquon is going to be the featured back. Because when you look at years past, they've never really had what I would consider as a true number one in what you would consider like Saquon Barkley to be, because he's clearly going to be the number one back, and you're going to have Kenneth Gainwell behind him, but Saquon's going to get the load of the work here. And it's just going to be interesting to see how that team adapts offensively with that change. But like Kev said, I do believe that, the Eagles are one of the best teams in the NFL on paper, and they should win a considerable amount of games this year, at least 11 to 12 games as far as I'm concerned. Anything less than that would probably be a failure as far as I'm concerned. But I think both teams are in a really good position here. As far as the game is concerned, when it takes place in Brazil, it's really a toss-up in my mind. You can make a case for either or, but I'm going to say that the Packers shocked the Eagles in this one. I think it's going to be a relatively close game. I could see this game potentially being a one-possession game when it's all said and done. But I'm going to go with Jordan Love. I'm going to go with the fact that maybe not a lot of people are counting them in for this game, and they're looking at just how stacked the Eagles roster is going into not only this game, but into this season. And I think that they have a possibility to shock the world, no pun intended, with the game taking place in Brazil, and get a win on the road. And granted, when I look at these games, a lot of these teams are going to go through adjustments the first 4 weeks of the year anyway. So I'm not really going to put too much emphasis on this game as far as the outlook for the rest of the season, because these teams are going to be a lot different from now compared to what we see in late October into early November. But I think it's going to be a fun game. I'm going to pick the Packers by one possession in this one, and we'll see what happens when it comes to the whole security situation that's been surrounding this game, because both teams, as far as I've seen, are not really happy about the situation down there.
It's going to be interesting. Obviously, depending on how this develops, we will continue to monitor it. Hopefully, the game goes without a hitch, without a problem. Hopefully, they can play a game straight through, get on the plane that night, and go home. Nobody wants to be difficult, and nobody wants to go out like partying. So I pray for all their safety, both Green Bay and Philly. Everybody just wants to get back on American soil. They did their part. The NFL hopefully makes their money, and maybe they consider a little bit further about maybe booking games internationally. I am all for spreading NFL awareness and getting everybody hyped up to have the NFL come to town, but it's a pick and choose situational awareness kind of thing. You can't just go and drop somebody in the pit of things in a bad area and expect the world to come together in that moment. You have to kind of prepare and see and do your research, but I'm not a political executive, and I'm not Roger Goodell, so I'm just here giving my opinion.
It's weird because, up until probably about a week ago, I mean, I know the game was scheduled in Brazil, but I imagine over the last week or so, both teams probably had some sort of team meeting as far as like security personnel discussing the situation, like basically the living situation down there when they're in Brazil before the game. And granted, just from some of the videos that I saw, and A.J. Brown in particular was mentioning about not leaving his hotel room when he's down there. I think it really kind of underscores the security concerns surrounding this game. Now, like Kev said, I have no problem with the NFL trying to expand its brand globally. I think, you know, any corporation of the size like the NFL would probably do the same. But, you know, the thing is that you have to make sure that from a security perspective that everything is locked down, like everything is locked down tight, good, ready to go. And just the sense that I have of this game before the game actually takes place is that things seem to be a little unstable in that regard, and there's definitely some uneasiness associated, not amongst just the teams themselves, but the individual players. Like the individual players seem to be voicing their concerns more than what you would typically see from an international game. I mean, we've seen international games take place in Mexico City. They've been taking place over in Europe, like over in London. They've had a couple in Germany over the
Germany.
last couple of years, and there really hasn't been any sort of noticeable security concerns. It's just down in Brazil, there apparently seems to be an elevated sense of risk or elevated height of risk that you could say down there. So hopefully everything goes down there fairly well. Hopefully things go off without a hitch. But outside of that, I do think it's going to be a fun game, and you know, hopefully those the uneasiness surrounding that game will be completely gone and away with, you know, once that game kicks off and you know, that game, you know, runs its course. So, but it should be a fun game.
Hopefully so. Next on the list, definitely going to be an interesting portion or an interesting segment because our residential New England
New England.
Patriots fan. Yeah, New England Patriots because he's not a Red Sox fan, so thank God. You know, our residential New England Patriots fan is what's the word I'm trying to say? He is accepting a transition outside of just the Tom Brady era. It is now potentially the Drake May era or maybe the Joe Milton era. But right now, as it stands, Gerard Mayo has announced Jacoby Brissett to start week 1. So, Kyle, let me get your thoughts on not only how this game is going to go, but what do you think about Mayo's decision to start the veteran over 2 quite capable rookie quarterbacks?
Well, I think when it comes to the quarterback decision, I don't really think it's going to matter that much this year because when I look at the situation with the Patriots offensive line, outside of David Andrews, I think that this is going to be a pretty unstable offensive line. Now, granted, they have Michael Wenu on there to provide some stability, but you know, this is not the New England offensive line that Patriot fans have been accustomed to when Brady was running the show and Belichick was running the show, where essentially that offensive line was locked down every game of the year. Now, granted, you know, some games they lost, but nobody was really concerned about the issues regarding the offensive line. That is definitely the case this year. And it's been a noticeable issue over the last couple of years. And I don't think there's been enough done to really remedy that situation for my liking. Now, when it comes to the Patriots going up against the Bengals this weekend, you know, this game is going to get ugly as far as the result is concerned, because if I'm looking at this from the Bengals perspective, this is a tune-up game for them. You know, granted, when we look at tune-up games, I usually always refer to college football. Usually like the first week, you have like Alabama usually go up against some like third-rate school like Appalachian State or you know, some sort of FCS team, and they kick the shit out of them by like 40, 50 points. That's usually what you would see in those tune-up games in the realm of college football. This is as close as you're going to get to that in the NFL, because when I look at the Bengals on paper, they should beat the Patriots by at least 3 touchdowns in this game. The only thing that's going to make this game interesting as far as I'm concerned is whether or not that Patriots defense can step up, because the only thing that made the Patriots somewhat a competitive team last year, despite the fact that they had a terrible record, their defense kept them in it throughout most of the games last year, despite the fact that Mac Jones completely forgot how to play football. And going into this year, obviously there's a lot of focus and there's a lot of attention paid towards Drake May. If they put Drake May in there, they're probably going to set him up for failure. Truth be told, they're really setting up anybody who's playing the quarterback position for failure with the lack of offensive line talent surrounding whoever's going to be the starting quarterback. And when it comes to the wide receiver position, you have a lot of young receivers here. When it comes to the number one option might be Demario Douglas. Demario Douglas is still relatively young in his NFL career. They have KJ Osborne. And if you look at KJ Osborne was pretty much a third string wide receiver, you know, when he was alongside Justin Jefferson, and you could maybe even say when Adam Thielen was there. But is this going to be enough? They have some young receivers like Jalen Polk. Now they do have Jalen Rager. I think they cut him and then they brought him back onto the practice squad. So I don't know necessarily if they're going to have him starting as a wide receiver. But this wide receiver core is very weak. They don't have the pieces to be able to be a competitive team like in years past when they had Brady and Belichick at the helm. So when it comes to the Bengals, as long as the Bengals get off to a good start, I think they'll be fine. But when you look at the Bengals, they've had a checkered history in starting the season. And there have been plenty of times where we can look back where the first month of the season has been very rough for them. They've lost games that they probably should have won, and they haven't looked as good in the month of September as we would expect. So hopefully for them, they get those issues and those kinks worked out. Obviously, they have some issues lingering with the contract situation of Jamar Chase. His status for Sunday is still up in the air, so we don't know if he's going to play or not. But overall, I think when it comes to this game, I think the Bengals are going to win handily. And when it comes to the Patriots, I think the Patriots are going to have a very long road ahead of them. I think at best, we're looking at maybe like 4 or 5 wins for the entire year. And when it comes to the Bengals, I think the Bengals have a very good chance to kind of regain the momentum that they had from a couple years ago where they went all the way to the Super Bowl. And, unfortunately for them, they lost to the Rams. But they have that capability still. And they should still be regarded as a contender within the AFC. But when it comes to them, they have to get off to a hot start. They can't fall out of the gate and have really a bad start to start the year. And I think when it comes to this game in particular, I think they'll do what they're supposed to do. They should beat New England handily, start the year 1-0, and then go into week 2 with that momentum. And when it comes to New England, just get ready for a long year. That's how I see it.
I wouldn't say it's interesting. For me, it's pretty clear and concise. It's just a matter of whether or not the Bengals are going to be able to show up. My biggest thing with Cincinnati is, like I said in my intro or in my lead up, Cincinnati for the last 2 seasons prior to this season has started off insanely slow. Now, whether or not they're going to this week against a weaker opponent, I don't know. But what I'm getting at is Joe Burrow can be the best quarterback this league has seen in decades, right? He's got the potential. He's got the receiving core. He's got the offensive-minded head coach. He's got the confidence, the swagger, all of those things. And I'm not saying better than Patrick Mahomes. He is of that upper echelon tier of somebody who can win and lead a team despite having things or factors holding him back, which I'm going to get at right now, is his offensive line. Joe Burrow has gone through a multitude of starting guards, has gone through a multitude of starting tackles. They've rotated centers. I feel bad for the man because he truly and honestly reminds me of Andrew Luck. Somebody who has all the potential, all the talent in the world, all the fundamentals and the key marks that you look for a franchise quarterback, and he just can't stay healthy. Now, there have been rumors and signs through camp that the offensive line has had its ups and downs and woes and trials and tribulations. So we may be in for another season where Joe's going to get whacked and he's going to have to figure it out. But this season is different because he doesn't have Joe Mixon as a safety blanket. Jamar Chase has been holding out outside of this practice that he had this week throughout this offseason. And then you just talk about the long list of that Joe Burrow has gone through. He's still recovering from that wrist. He's cleared to play, but that is something that he's going to have to adjust to. Who knows how that's going to hold up after he gets hit a few times, and so on and so forth. Now, on the New England side, Jacoby Brissett is a well-vetted veteran, right? I probably could have worded that differently, but it is what it is. He is somebody that has played in a multitude of teams. He is somebody that can be that bridge quarterback. He is someone that has seen a lot, and he's also partnering with a rookie head coach, a defensive-minded rookie head coach at that. So I agree with Kyle. This is something that is going to be a buckle up. This is about to be a rough season. I'm not sitting here saying that the Patriots are going to get blown out week in and week out because that defense is solid. But on the off chance that it does end up becoming, well, let's rotate these guys. Let's go week to week. Jacoby does bad. Let's put in a rookie Drake May. Drake May does bad. Let's give the kid that can throw 90 yards in Milton an opportunity to see what he can do. You never know. But this should be a Bengals blowout. This should be a Bengals victory. This 100% should be a warm-up game for Joe Burrow because the offense of the Patriots does not compare. And I think that the talent at the quarterback position is far and away one of the bigger gaps in matchups this season because Jacoby, when he was on teams, would consistently get benched constantly. And then you have 2 rookies behind him. Joe Burrow has been to a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow is one of the few people that has knocked off Patrick Mahomes. Joe Burrow was the number one overall pick and found a way, despite being sacked almost 70 times, if not more than 70 times in the 2021 season, he still found a way to become a play away from a Super Bowl. And it came down to the offensive line falling apart again, because if you look at the replay from that Super Bowl, Jamar Chase is wide open on a go route, but Aaron Donald, obviously he's retired, one of the greatest defensive players of all time, just barrels through that weakened, battered, and bruised offensive line of the Bengals, and he ends up damn near sacking Joe Burrow. But what I'm getting at is, in terms of a matchup, it's not something appealing that I would tune into. Obviously, as my partner said, he's a Patriots fan. He is just preparing for the worst. I respect that. I respect the honesty. But from a NFL fan, unless Drake May jumps in this game or Joe Milton jumps in the game, it's not a game that I would want to waste my time watching, aside from maybe Joe Burrow highlights. But yeah, I think that the Bengals should win this game comfortably, and I hope that Joe Burrow can stay healthy.
Yeah, Kev, I wouldn't have put it any other way. I think New England is going to go through some growing pains this year. Um, they've really been going through growing pains ever since Brady left. It's never really been the same since he's left, and I mean, it's understandable. Obviously, when you lose somebody of that caliber, it's going to be very difficult to be able to replace that. But overall, when I look at the Bengals are still a team that I consider as a potential AFC contender. It's just like you said, they have to get off to a hot start, and they can't start slow at the beginning of the year like they have in years past, because all it does is really kind of set them behind the eight ball, and they're not doing themselves any favors getting off to those slow starts like they have in years past. So obviously that's something that we'll keep in mind in week one. But like Kev said, and like we both said, I expect that game to be a blowout. I think New England gets washed pretty easily in that game. If New England keeps it close, it's going to be because of that defense. That's going to be the only reason why that game would be somewhat competitive. But moving on, I know we talked about my team. Now we're going to transition to Kev's number one team, which is the Indianapolis Colts. We have a pretty solid AFC South divisional matchup this weekend. We've got the Houston Texans going up against the Indianapolis Colts. Now, obviously, when it comes to the Texans have been a team on the rise. CJ Stroud had a pretty successful rookie campaign as a member of the Texans. And when it comes to Houston overall, they have definitely made some big splashes. Like, for example, they brought in Stephon Diggs. I believe he's actually one of the team captains now. I think that was announced just a couple days ago.
Mm-hmm.
So they definitely have a lot of trust, and I think I wouldn't say just trust, but I think his command of just the knowledge that he possesses within that wide receiver realm. I think they definitely see that, and they see that as something to invest in for the next couple of years. But when it comes to the Colts, I think, are finally in a situation where their skill players are finally healthy. Obviously, we did not get to see Anthony Richardson for the entire year because he was dealing with injuries left and right last year. Jonathan Taylor has been in and out of the lineup over the last couple of years. He does seem to be on track to be fully healthy for this year. But when it comes to Indianapolis, a lot remains to be seen because this still is a fairly young team, and we don't know how Anthony Richardson is going to progress in year two. Hopefully, it works out for him, but a lot is still left to be determined just based off the fact that we didn't get to see him for an entire season last year. So, Kev, you're the Colts fan here. Obviously, this is going to be a huge divisional matchup against the Texans and the Colts this weekend. How do you see this game playing out? And then how do you see both teams, as far as the roadmap is concerned for this season, how do you see both teams navigating the season as a whole?
So, I mean, this is going to be one of the toughest matchups of the year. Again, I mentioned it in my lead up or in my introduction. Last year ended in a horrible manner. I remember watching the game with some of my friends at the bar, and it literally came down to one catch all the way at the end. Drop pass behind him, or excuse me, a throw behind him. You can go down the list of whatever the reason is. Injuries screwed us last year. Inexperience screwed us last year. Contract holdouts with Jonathan Taylor being there, not there the offseason, that screwed us. Now we came back reloaded. We had a pretty decent draft. I think that the camp and team that we have right now is decent. I still think that Houston wins the division just because I think that they are still better than us. I think that the acquisitions that they made are better than us. I think that their team is overall constructed better than us, but I do know that we can give them a run for their money. And the reason why I say that is we did all of what we did last year and a lot of Gardner Minshew. And that is no slight to Gardner. I know that I kind of crapped on him all season last year. I was very, very critical of his performance, but we still found a way to be relevant. We still found a way to be in a position to compete for a playoff spot despite everything that we had gone through. But Shane Steichen's offense has shown me one thing and one thing only. There is so much potential. Because we were able to do that with Gardner, with Anthony Richardson, all we need to see is his continued development. I need to see him make better decisions in the pocket. I need to see him slide and prevent his injuries. And I also need him to be accurate with his reads. So from a Colts fan standpoint, I hope that we can at least win 9 to 10 games again. I'm not going to sit here and be satisfied with middle of the pack. I'm just being more realistic. I think our schedule is kind of like not the hardest in the world, but it's not the easiest. I think in the middle of the year, we have a couple of difficult games coming up. But overall, when you have to face Houston twice, Jacksonville twice, we haven't beat God knows in how long. I'm not going to sit here and sleep on Tennessee, even though we're their father. I mean, we've been playing very well against them. At the end of the day, I really do think that the Colts can make some noise. It's just truly and honestly on the shoulders of Anthony Richardson. Our secondary is probably our weakest aspect just because we don't have any definitive corners that can go out there and make a play outside of Kenny Moore, but that is our nickel corner, not really an outside. So based on how the secondary goes, it's probably going to be how the defense goes. We got to see how the pass rush works, but overall, I think the Colts are poised for an above 500 season. It's just a matter of the health of Anthony Richardson. Houston, you go and you add Danielle Hunter. You go and you add Joe Mixon. You go and you add Cam Akers for depth. Then you go and you get Stephon Diggs. And then you not only add Diggs, you give him exactly what he wants. They basically took off the remainder of the contract that he had with Buffalo, and they gave him a prove-it deal. We turned it into guarantees. We turned it into incentives. You want to stay in Houston. You want to play with C.J. Stroud. You got to show us you're not going to be a headache in the locker room. You're not going to be a distraction to the locker room. Oh, look, there it goes again. And then you're going to have to perform because there were plenty of opportunities during that run with Buffalo last year where Stephon Diggs was eliminated from games due to his mentality. He got in his own head. He had some key drops in the playoffs, and there were just some instances where he was just not on the same page with Josh Allen. So they need to wipe that slate clean, come to Houston, and get ready to go. DeMeco Ryans, very much a coach of the year candidate again this year, depending on how this team goes. Obviously, he was the runner-up last year to Kevin Stefanski, but he showed that he can rally a group of men. He can rally this defense to make them better. And when you go and you add a perennial Pro Bowler like Danielle Hunter, somebody who is averaging well over double-digit sacks for the majority of his career, this is somebody who is going to be a disruptor alongside Will Anderson on the opposite side. So this is going to be a very scary team. I think that the Houston Texans can easily win 11 to 13 games depending on their strength of schedule. I personally have not looked at it, but I know for a fact with this roster very minimal teams that can beat them one-on-one. Obviously, I mentioned Philadelphia is one of the better teams in the league. Obviously, Kansas City is one of the better teams. Then you go and you have the Baltimore Ravens as well, the Cincinnati Bengals, and go on and so on and so on. But again, I don't know their schedule. So I would say that they win the AFC South. I think that they end up getting either a first-round bye. I think that C.J. Stroud is that good. I think they'll be a top 2 seed, or they'll be right there on the cusp of top 3, top 4. But again, the Houston Texans are only going to get better with experience. C.J. Stroud is absolutely a generational talent. And then you go and you have DeMeco Ryans. It's going to be a compelling game. Games against the Houston Texans over the course of the last couple of seasons, despite injuries to the quarterbacks, have been competitive. And I think that Anthony Richardson and C.J. Stroud moving forward over the next 5 to 10 years are going to be electric matchups. So I got Houston beating us by a narrow margin. I hope that we pull it out. But when it comes to what I think Houston brings to the table, the confidence that they have coming back, and our weakness in the secondary, I think that Houston's going to find another way to slip one past us.
And honestly, Kev, I really can't add much here. I think you pretty much just hit the nail on the head. I'm just going to kind of look from a macro perspective here with both teams. I think this really has a potential to be a dynamite matchup in the division for the next, like you said, 5 to 10 years, just because of the potential that you see in both teams. I think when it comes to Houston, I think Houston is at a better point in that process when it comes to compared to Indianapolis, because I think Indianapolis, we still haven't seen what they've been like when they've been running on full cylinders with Anthony Richardson and a fully healthy with Jonathan Taylor. Jesus Christ.
Jonathan Taylor.
And I think when it comes to just when you look at Houston, just with the core players that they have alongside CJ Stroud, I mean, that offense is really stacked from top to bottom at the running back position, at the wide receiver position. I mean, you have Stephon Diggs, you have Nico Collins, and you have Tank Dell. I mean, you got 3 studs out there. And I think, when it comes to the matchup, I think this is going to be a competitive game nonetheless. But like you said, I think that just the firepower that Houston has at their disposal on that offense, I think it's going to be difficult for that Indianapolis defense to be able to hold up against. And the biggest thing for me when it comes to Indianapolis is, can they be able to retain the football? If they're not, getting into a situation where they're turning the ball over consistently, because Houston's defense has been known to get turnovers pretty consistently with that defense. If Indianapolis turns the ball over 2 or 3 times in this game, that game could get out of hand very quickly, because Houston, with that offense, can respond very quickly. And I will just say this, obviously, when we look at CJ Stroud, he's going into year 2 of his NFL career. I think a lot of people see the potential of what this team is. And I think, like you said, I think around 11, 13 wins is pretty solid. Like I said, I'd have to look at their schedule just because I don't really know it off the top of my head. But this team definitely has the roster to basically be an 11, 12, potentially 13 win team. And when it comes to Indianapolis, I think their ceiling this year is probably a wild card spot. I think at best we're probably looking at like 9 to 10 wins for them. Hopefully it works out for you guys like that, because I remember, I want to say last year when Mac Jones was the quarterback for the Patriots, we were kind of expecting a similar type of season where, maybe we would get like 8, 9, 10 wins at best and maybe slide into one of the last playoff spots, and then it just ended in disaster. So hopefully you guys don't go through what I went through and that the Patriot fans went through last year. But overall, I think it's going to be a fun game. These divisional games are always fun to watch, and I think that this one's definitely going to live up to the billing. But I'm going to take the Texans in this one. I think it's still going to be a relatively close game. I think the Texans win by a possession in this one. But if Indianapolis does turn the ball over, I think this game could get out of hand, and the Texans may potentially win by 2+ possessions here. But Kev, when it comes to the 49ers and Jets, I know that game's on Monday. Honestly, we could just leave that one. We could kind of just put a pin in it with that one. We could save that one for next week. Obviously, that's a big Monday night game, and there may be a point in time where you and I may be able to discuss that game, but that's still a couple of days away. So I think it's probably just best if we probably just put a pin in it for that one and just bookmark it for later.
No worries. It's totally fine. Hey, brother, I'm happy football's back. I am super happy that the baseball playoffs are coming back. College football's back. There's a lot to unpack, guys. Fall is here. Not necessarily fall in Florida, but fall is here nonetheless, the season, and we have a lot of sports to unfold. We talked about it at the top of the hour. I'm just going to reiterate, man. We are excited to be back. We are definitely open to suggestions. We are open on all social media platforms once again, so reach out to us with anything you guys want to see, any games you want us to cover, any debates you want us to kind of have. We definitely are looking forward to having guests back on the podcast as well, but bear with us. It's going to be a little rusty for a couple weeks. We're going to be fine-tuning some of the tech stuff, but overall, couldn't be happier to be back with my boy in the booth, man. Super happy to be back, bro.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. It's been a long time coming. I know just life got in the way, but I figured it was a good time that, we have football coming up, college football, baseball playoffs are coming around, like you said. Just felt like the time was right to be able to, literally get back in the studio and get to cooking. So,
Hell yeah.
hopefully we were not too bad as far as
You were okay.
the listening experience or the visual experience. Like I said, it's a little rusty. So maybe give us an episode or two to shake off the rust, but hopefully we get into a consistent rhythm sooner rather than later. But we definitely appreciate you guys tuning in, whether it's on the audio platforms or on YouTube. We will be posting. We'll try to be regular on those platforms as best as we can, but we may not be as frequent as we once were initially. That may change, once Kevin and I kind of get back up to speed compared to what we used to do. But in the meantime, just bear with us. We're going to put out as much content as we can for you guys, and hopefully you guys stick around for the ride.
All right, guys. We will see you guys again soon. Appreciate the support that we've had for the last couple of months while we were away, but the boys are back. We hope you guys have just been patient with us, but it's going to be a good time. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Yep. See you guys later.